stumble around, that's why I'm stumbling around. The question was asked, and this question has been asked, in my experience, for literally decades. And that is Buddhism a religion? This gentleman right over here, I think it was him, or was it you? It was one of the two of you said, well, you know, now, we're eating lunch. You know, is Buddhism a religion or what? And this is an interesting thing, and if it is a religion, then why is it a religion? And that, so we have to kind of go, the first thing that comes to my mind is my response always was to people that ask this question, it meets all the needs that I have of a religion. Now, that's really begging the question, because first of all, that just says, I'm happy with it. It doesn't really point anything out. It doesn't say, well, it's a religion because of this or because of that. And one of the things, I know that I irritate people a lot at times because I ask too many questions. And I know I do that. And for a long time I thought it was because I spent formal years as a teacher. But I think I've always been irritated. You know, because someone will say, well, you know, that person, he's a really bad person. I never accept anything on face value, so I go, why? Why do you say they're a bad person? Now, you know how people interpret that? They interpret that I'm challenging what they say. And in reality, I'm not challenging what they say. I just really want to understand. So if you tell me that so-and-so is a bad person, and I go, well, why do you say that? And some people would say, well, why can't you accept what I say? Well, because I'm a human being and I'm able to think and I'm able to form my own opinions. Now, if you replied to me, well, first of all, you know he's married, yes. He beats his wife every Friday night. Whoa, that's not a good person. And I've seen him in the store, and when nobody's looking, he takes things off the shelf and puts it in his pocket. Whoa, that's not good. And I saw him the other day that he, you know, I think I've seen this in the last 2 or 3 months on the news, and I don't watch a lot of news, but and I don't always watch it every day. But I think I can think of 3 different occasions where people ran other people over and kept going. The last one I saw, the guy actually stopped, got out, looked at the lady laying on the ground, got back in his car and drove away. Well, to me, that's a bad person. But you know, if I thought you didn't understand, I might go, so why do you think he's a bad person? Was he a bad person because he hit her? Was it intentional or not intentional? Was it truly an accident? Then I would say, was he a bad person because he got out, looked at her laying on the ground unconscious and drove away? Well, come on. Hit and run is against the law. They throw you in jail for that. So maybe, you know what I'm saying? I have a tendency to irritate people because I ask them to explain themselves, just like you asked me to explain. Is Buddhism a religion? And the fact that it satisfies me is no reason why it should satisfy you. So I have to point out a couple things. One of them is, we've all heard the term heathen. Okay? And I want you to think, what does that bring up in your mind? Okay. Indigenous. What does that bring up in your mind? What are you actually thinking when you hear that? I was sitting in Pops and Pam's, which used to be a little hamburger ice cream place in Lucerne Valley, but they left or moved. I don't know why. They always had a lot of business. And she now, by the way, she now has a restaurant with her daughter over at the Apple Valley Airport. And she cooks pretty good food if you want to take somebody out for an outing. She did it over at the Sperry Airport. I went over there because I saw it in the paper. And I thought, I'll go check it out. And I had breakfast there, it was pretty good, and then she had to move for whatever. And I was sitting in there having an ice cream, and this lady came in, and her children were in soccer. And she made the statement, I don't understand why we have to pay for my kids to play soccer because we're indigent. What does that mean to you? Well, I got to tell you the truth. First of all, I wasn't even sure what she said when she said indigent. And I thought it was that other word. And I had to go home and get out the dictionary, and I thought, what does that mean? And that means that they're probably on welfare. And that means they can't support themselves, indigent. And that means somebody needs to take care of them, however you want to say it. Well, when they opened a high school in the beautiful town of Lucerne Valley, cultural center of the state of California, when they opened a high school here, they always had an elementary school within memory. I mean, when this town was founded, I have 2 very poorly written books about the history of this town. And they are poorly written, but they are history. And the first thing they did is they had a post office and a grade school. So the grade school, which by the way is really well-run grade school and always has been, well, they decided they needed a whole high school, so they got a football team. And they printed out the demographics of our community. And I was amazed because 50% of the people that lived in Lucerne Valley were receiving assistance of some kind. 45% were retired. 5% were gainfully employed, actually had a job. So 95% of the people that lived in this town, if they worked, they weren't able to support themselves. That gives you an interesting outlook. Indigent. Now I sat there in my great wisdom and I thought, because I've helped with things like soccer and stuff like that when I was young. This is what I thought, she doesn't understand that this is not a government program. This is something that you and me set up, and in order to buy equipment and uniforms, we have to charge the family, not the kid doesn't have any money, just so we can buy a uniform to put on the kid and buy balls to kick around the field. Same thing with the Little League. I was on a Little League board for 3 or 4 years, and it's the same thing. You've got expensive equipment and uniforms, blah, 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 and trophies, and nobody pays. At this temple, for 7 years, we had a Boy Scout troop. We sponsored a Boy Scout troop. And I was the scoutmaster. And I was asked to have a Boy Scout troop because nobody else in the town would sponsor it. And I remember one of the young men coming in, just turned 12, was able to be a Boy Scout. And one day he asked me, how much money do you make being a scoutmaster? I said, well, I spend about around $300 a month. So it's a perception thing. What is a heathen? Well, a heathen is somebody that doesn't believe what you believe. Where did that term come from? The Catholic Church. The Catholic Church went out to convert the heathens. No, we did that here, right? Or they did that here, I didn't do it, okay? But they came to California, and they got the Indians, and they made them live next to the church, and the Indians built the church, and they converted them to Catholicism. And if they didn't want to be Catholics, you do remember that conquistadors came with the priests. Guys with big swords and spears, they came with the priests to make sure everybody agreed what was going on. So what is a heathen? Well, I'm a heathen because I do not practice Catholicism. Now later on, the Protestants, when they came along, they liked that term, so they used that. And they went to Hawaii. And they made everybody in Hawaii wear clothes. You know that story? They made everybody that lived in Hawaii put clothes on. The women ran around and you could see everything. It was like Playboy magazine live. okay? And all the Pacific Islanders, they wore something to cover their bottom, okay? But nobody covered their top. It's 75, 80, 90 degrees all the time. It doesn't snow there. They didn't have coats, you know? So the Protestant missionaries went. And of course they're going to save the heathen. And they made them wear clothes. And what do you think happened? They got sick. Because when you basically don't wear much of anything and you jump in the water all the time, you're clean. But now you put clothes on. They didn't sell them washing machines. They didn't give them a class on it. You know why? Because they didn't understand. Those missionaries didn't understand cleanliness. They didn't understand germs. Nobody even knew about germs at that time. So they're loaded terms. Aborigines, what does that mean? I'm doing this to show you it's all about what your definition is of something that establishes what it is. What is an Aborigine? Well, the American Indian, which of course they don't like that term, what they prefer is the first people. That's not a bad term. Okay, I watch the Indian channel sometimes. And so from Canada all the way down through North America and to South America, they're the first people. Think about what that means. It doesn't mean the people that sprang out of the earth here, they were the first to arrive. Everybody in every place but Africa is an immigrant. According to the latest, and they believed this for a long time. Christians would say the Garden of Eden was somewhere in Africa. Anthropologists and archaeologists have established that there was a great diaspora and people left from Africa, spread through Europe and Asia, and eventually they invented boats. They got in boats and they came here. So the first people really only says, and I don't argue with it, I think it's a non-aggressive term. We are the first people. Okay, you're the first people that got here. And then some more people came after you and they did what people always do. They took what they could get. So what is a religion? If I get my Webster's, I have a Webster's dictionary that I bought years ago that was in my classroom for when a kid said, what does that mean? I said, look it up. Tell all of us. And the cover's falling off of it. And I looked it up after one of you asked me. And it said, religion is a belief in God. Basically, that's what it said. Religion is a belief in God and everything God wants you to do. Okay, so Christians, they believe in God. They can't agree with each other. There's close to 400 different denominations of Protestants in America. Over 400. Does that sound like anybody agrees on anything? No. And we go to the Catholic Church. This was mentioned last night. Well, there's more than one version of the Catholic Church that was brought up. And we've got the old Catholic Church, which started in Sweden about 200 years ago. I looked it up because somebody I know got ordained in the old Catholic Church, and I thought, what is that? And they disagreed with Rome 200 years ago. Then we got the Orthodox. We got the Greek Orthodox and the Syrian Orthodox. We got the Eastern Orthodox, which is part of the Roman Church. We got all these different people. They all believe in God. Okay? And that makes a religion. If you happen to be white, and you happen to be from Europe, oh, well, maybe you're not totally white. Maybe you've got a nice tan because you're from Spain or someplace like that, or from Mexico, okay? But we're going to call it a belief in God, except that we have a couple of religions that don't believe in a creator God. Taoism doesn't believe in a creator God. Shinto doesn't believe in a creator God. Okay, Confucianism, which started off as a philosophy on how to run your family and the state. Okay? And it really was about politics, but it was also about ethics. And they turned it into a religion in China. So they have three religions. They have Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. And Buddhism is a foreign religion in every place but India. Because it started in India, that's foreign. And the Hindus believe in God. They believe in a creator God. Okay, so they get to have a religion. But these other ones, well, who wrote the dictionary? A Buddhist didn't write the dictionary. Somebody that believed in God wrote the dictionary. So that's the definition we get. So if we forget about God for a minute and we say, what is religion? What does religion tell us or teach us or give us answers to? My mother used to talk about, at one time people lived in caves, which we know they do. By the way, we have some archaeological sites over outside of Barstow if you've never been there. And remember Mr. Leakey, Dr. Leakey, he passed away, his son has continued. They have a dig out there, and you can go. I went with a college class, but I think they give tours, but you have to make appointments. And they're digging up old Indian sites, old First Nation sites. There's a cave in Newberry Springs that goes back well over 1,000 years. And it has layers in the cave, and it's protected now. You can't go in. People go and steal stuff. Oh, archaeological site, I'll take this home as a souvenir. Okay? We're surrounded by people that used to live here. But what does religion answer? Well, people in a cave with a fire going so they don't freeze to death. And it gets dark, and they can't see what's outside. And then there's lightning, and there's loud noises. And of course, they already know that there's things that want to eat them outside, right? So they've got to be careful about that. They ask the question, how did we get here? And the early gods, the very first gods, were all women gods. And they made nice little statues of them. They weren't very big, because remember, these are people, they don't have any technology at all. So they made these little statues out of clay. And later they carved them when they started inventing tools. They carved them out of bone and out of ivory. And these lovely little fertility gods. She was quite robust. Everything was big. Okay? And she was the mother god. Because if you ask the question, where do we come from? If you go to your child, or you go to a person who doesn't know where you're coming from, say, how did we get here? Where do we come from? Well, your mother. So this idea of the Great Mother was very early in the game. Brahman, which the Hindus believe in, it kind of looks like a guy, but they never talk about gender. They do later on with other, the great destroyer of life is a female to the Hindus. So figure that out. So it answers questions that we cannot answer through observation. We cannot answer through science, because at the time the question was first asked, there was no science. Science is a relatively new phenomenon. I didn't realize this for the longest time, and I've taken philosophy class and comparative religion class. I didn't realize that humanism had replaced, in some countries, religion. Humanism is turned science into religion. Science will answer all the questions that you can't come up with an answer for. Therefore, you don't have to believe in anything but science. That sound reasonable? Well, let's think about what religions usually tell us. They tell us how to be good. They tell us what bad is. They tell us how to be kind. They speak against people who are not kind to other people. And that's very early on in the game that they do that. Some religions have decided that we need to scare you because you're sitting in a cave. So we say, if you're not nice to people, you're going to be treated badly later on. That's what Buddhists do. They say, if you're not nice to people when you are reborn, you'll have a lousy life. And that's it on the surface. That's just on the surface. And to me, that's a scare tactic. You tell children, well, if you're bad, when you die, you'll come back as a cockroach. And the child goes, ooh, ooh. So Buddhists do that, and that's really superstition to say that you're going to be punished, because ultimately karma is not about punishment at all. I think the most healthy view about karma in Buddhist communities comes from the Tibetans, who believe that rebirth is about learning lessons. If you didn't understand, think about this. If you're terrible to people and you're reborn again, you're not, by the way, Buddhist rebirth is not reincarnation. I'm using rebirth. I read something the other day that reminded me of that. Because reincarnation is Tom Mung comes back. It is Tom Mung. His personality and everything comes back. Tibetans kind of believe that. Typically in Buddhism, though, we just believe that the energy that is you, the consciousness that is you, continues on after the material stuff is gone. So the Tibetan notion is, it's really quite fanciful, you know, that after you die you review your life. Well, they go through sensory deprivation. That's how they came up with that. They sit in a tent that's absolutely totally dark for a long time. We're not talking a couple of days, we're talking about weeks. And then they start to have these dreams. And what they come up with is that you review what you did in your previous life. It's a nice idea. You can't prove it, but it's a nice idea. And then you pick what your rebirth is going to be. So if you were terrible to people, then you'll be reborn in a situation where you suffer what they suffered. That's a lesson. That's not punishment. The one phrase that I dislike that is used all the time, and it's translated, and it probably is used by Buddhists, because most of what we get is something that was in Chinese or Sanskrit, or Pali, or Japanese, or Vietnamese, and it gets translated into English, and we don't know how accurate that is. I'm reading Pablo Gosha's Awakening of Faith in Mahayana, and this morning when I was reading it, it talked about the soul. And it's not talking about the soul at all. Not like Christians talk about the soul. It talks about your innate nature, your suchness, who you really are, not who you think you are. And it talks about the universal soul. And you've heard me talk about this probably more than you want to, that everybody is connected. The illusion is that we're separate. That's where the confusion comes in. The awakening is, I realize that we are connected. Anything I do to you, I do to me. And when I understand that, then my behavior changes. Hopefully, it changes. So, religion gives us ethical behavior. It gives us morality. You don't, how you conduct yourself with other people, with children, how you conduct yourself in society. And if you say to me, well, that sounds like a philosophy, I can't argue with you. All I can tell you is that people that believe in a particular philosophy don't practice the philosophy. I've never run into anybody that really practices the philosophy in the sense of, I'll give you an example. Determinism means that all things are determined and you have no control. Behaviorism says that all things are determined by outside resources, outside sources, and you really can't change it. And behaviorism was started by a fellow by the name of Skinner. He had a PhD. He was a psychologist. He went and he saw what Pavlov did. You know, Pavlov rang the bell and the dog went, I'm hungry, it's time for dinner. And we do the same thing. You know, I thought of some food the other day, and I found my mouth watering. Okay, it's a response. Well, Skinner came along, and he's the one that trained all what do they call them? They call them laboratory psychologists or something like that. If you don't like them, you call them rat psychologists because they see how you can train rats and mice and what they do and all of that. And they've reduced us to that. So everything we do is already conditioned in us and we have no choice. There's no choice. Think about it. There is no choice. That's behaviorism. Determinism does not use the arguments that Skinner used, because Skinner did these things and he said, if I shock a mouse every time it tries to do this, it will stop doing it. If I shock a mouse. Now if I shock a human being eventually, and we try that in the penal system, how does it work? Not too damn good. No, you'd think it would work. You would think if I make you miserable for 5 years and then I put you back in society, you wouldn't want to be miserable again. That's not the case at all. Recidivism, high level of recidivism, going back to prison. We are much more complicated than a mouse. Soft determinism means that you can make some choices. When I had to take philosophy for college, we had to pick a philosophy out of the book. We read all the basic philosophies. We had to pick one and defend it. We had to write an essay in class for 2 hours, write, and talk about, defend it, and then defend what we thought. And I had soft determinism, which basically is that many things are conditioned, which I still believe, and we have a choice. Christianity, Middle-aged Christianity, said that God knew everything that was going to happen before you were ever born. God knew everything that was ever going to happen in the universe. That was Middle-aged religion, the Middle Ages and their religion. Okay? God knows everything. So then the question becomes, if God knows everything, why do you get punished for doing what He already knew you were going to do? Think about that. If you believe that God knows everything that you'll ever do in your life, how can He blame you? That's called predestination. It's already in a plan. It's already in the map. And then people that defend that say, well, but you have a choice. Well, where's the choice? It gets very complicated. And they use a magic word which explains away everything. You ready for it? You guys grew up Catholic, right? You've heard this word. It's a mystery. It's a mystery, therefore you can't understand it. You just have to accept it because we said it's so. Okay, in Buddhism, there are things people accept because they feel it's logical. Of all the things that can happen to you when you die, short of just sitting, like the Jewish belief, which still many Jews believe, when you die it's done. You're buried, and that's it. And I know you're going to ask the question, if you don't know this answer, I'll give it to you. Then why do Jews practice religion? They practice for their family. They have a covenant. They have an agreement with their God that if they're good, God will take care of their family. Their reward is their family gets taken. There's still a reward. Now, what's our reward? There is no reward for being good in Buddhism. So then what's the point? The point is you're not always happy. The Buddha didn't go out to start a new religion. He was a Hindu. He went out to figure out why people were unhappy. And he came up with a system to take care of unhappiness and misery and angst and whatever term, and dissatisfaction. He said, stop wanting what you cannot have. Accept what you have. Now that's my way of saying it. If you were from an Oriental country, from Asia somewhere, I have stopped using Oriental. The lady that cooks our food one day said to me, I'm not a rug. I'm not Oriental, I'm Asian. And I went, okay, gotta stop using that word. It's been around a long time, but we invented the word, they didn't invent, you know. So, Buddhism is a religion because it gives us a reason to be ethical. It gives us a reason to be moral. And those are two important things. The morality which we recited today, the 5 precepts that the Buddhists gave the lay people, and they are, without a doubt, the important ones. Monks in different traditions. Some traditions they take 228 rules. Some traditions they take 250. Some traditions they take 248. They really are all the same rules. It's just the way they state them. The one that only has 228, well, they combine a couple. Okay? Later on, we have 25 Dharma precepts, which condenses down those big rules into something workable. And my master used those and I rewrote them. I didn't eliminate anything. I just made it easier for Americans who don't like to read 250 rules. Okay? You can only have one bowl, period. You can only have one ground cloth, period. You can only have the number of robes you need. That's it. Don't ask for anything fancy. There's like 5 rules in there. Don't go to this person and ask. Don't ask for this. Just don't ask for anything fancy. I've got a robe that I wore one time so we could take a picture of it and mail it to the guy that bought it for me. And maybe in another 20 years, I'll be old enough that I can wear that big fancy robe. The tree knows what I'm talking about. Oh, it's beautiful. And it weighs about 20 pounds. And oh, it's just so fancy. And I need to be so old that I don't even know what you're saying. These guys will just bring me out, sit me down, and I'll go, is everything all right? And I'll go, okay, just sit there. Just sit there. Don't say anything. Just be quiet. Everything will be fine. We'll come and get you when we're done. And then they come and get me and carry and help me out. Okay? And I won't even be conscious of the robe, except it'll be so heavy. Oh, man. But we have ethical behavior. We don't say things that harm people. That's ethical. We don't act irresponsibility with sexuality. The Buddha went into great detail. We just say, we use don't commit adultery. In the Buddha's time, don't do anything with children. Sexual, that's morality. Do not touch. And you know, they didn't talk about boys, they talked about girls. And this is kind of missed when Buddhism comes here because generally the people that are, if you're going to an American place, they don't even talk about Buddhism. They talk about meditation, right? And they talk about koans. Oh, this master said to this disciple. Well, why did this master say that? What's at the bottom of this? The bottom of this is the Buddha was asked. Because those Indian guys, they're kind of like the machismo guys down in Mexico. They like their girlfriends. Don't you guys? You like your girlfriends. And they went to the Buddha and they said, how old does a girl need to be before we can get together with her? And the Buddha said, you cannot touch a girl that lives with her father or her husband. You know how long girls in India live with their father? Until they're married. So he basically said, you can't touch girls. You can't touch children. Now they get married very young over there. So he really was talking about children. But he said, you cannot touch a girl that lives with her father. And it's the old European thing, you know. The women were in their father's house, and then the father gave them away. Anybody ever thought about that at a wedding? The father gives away the bride.